2026 is going to be quite a year for Subaru, and especially in the way of electrification. This is the Solterra, which just got a refresh. But over to my left here, farther off, is going to be the Trailseeker. That's the all-new model. That's the bigger, more Outback-style EV, but it's not the only one. Subaru now has 3 brand new or totally refreshed EVs, and it is completely uncharted territory. And on that note, this is the 2026 Subaru Uncharted, which is coming in smaller than that Solterra, but with plenty of punch and a whole lot more style than I think we expected from Subaru, and there are a few other surprises as well. Like the other Subaru models out there, this Uncharted is going to be based on a Toyota equivalent. In this case, it's going to be something like that CHR Plus. But there are going to be a few distinct differences. The first is going to be just visual, because up front here, this is a totally different front end than we find over on that Toyota equivalent, and it's much boxier, a little bit more bold, and I think much more fitting with that Subaru style. And I appreciate that these things are getting a little bit farther apart, where previously, especially when you looked at the BZ4X and the Solterra, they were a little bit closer, and it didn't seem like they were their own unique models. But here we have big boxy headlight design. We also have really usable fog lights, thank goodness, because this is a Subaru. And the whole front end here is sort of interesting because it creates a grille that isn't there. Obviously, EV, it doesn't need that space. But here's what else is interesting, because it is going to share the same battery pack as that Toyota. It's a 74.7 kilowatt hour battery. It's going to have the same all-wheel drive system available, up to 338 horsepower on a dual motor all-wheel drive. But what Subaru gets and the Toyota doesn't is going to be a front-wheel drive variant, which seems a little bit interesting because Subaru is known as the brand of all-wheel drive. And in this case, that front-wheel motor is going to get you just about 300 miles of EV range, which makes it more than what you can get over on the Toyota. It also means that it should come in just a little bit less expensive. And while it's not 338 horsepower, it's still going to provide a significant punch at just over 220 horsepower. But what we have here is going to be one of the 3 trim variants. You can get them either in that premium front-wheel drive. So if you want that front motor, the lowest end trim is the only one you'll find it on. Otherwise, it's going to be the Sport or the GT. And what we have here is going to be the Sport, which means that it has 18-inch wheels, not the 20-inch ones we'll find over there on the GT. It also means that it's not going to have the available 2-tone roof. And in this case, black here would look really good on this really nice habanero color. But the fact remains that it also has enough Subaru remaining. And I mostly mean things like here in the body cladding, that's going to be your unpainted black plastic. But this is sort of a bit of a contrast because this is more of a city dwelling vehicle. It doesn't need to have all this plastic cladding, but it also does seem to work. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. You'll also know whether or not it's an all-wheel drive because they're going to come standard with these roof rails. They are going to be low profile roof rails. In this case, it's gloss black, which matches the rest of the accenting here. But with the black roof option, I bet those will disappear pretty quickly. While the other Subaru electric models are going to be a little bit more pragmatic and more function over form, this one is designed to be pretty sleek and good looking. So it's very much a crossover, but coupified crossover, which does mean we have a pretty steep rake here when it comes to that rear window, which is ultimately going to get cut into what we could get out of storage space, but it does add a unique look to it. But this sleek look is also going to be, again, in a bit of a contrast with how boxy things get here in the rear. And one thing missing here, we have a little baby spoiler, but I've seen a lot of interesting rear spoilers, especially big split ones. I wouldn't mind seeing something here that accentuates that drop just a little bit more. Let me know if that is tame enough or if that's just right where you want it to be. One thing that is going to be missing here, no rear windshield wiper. Probably doesn't need it, but for some folks that might be something at least worth considering. But as I mentioned, as we move around the back here, boxy is the style, and honestly, this looks a lot more like what I would expect on something like almost like a pickup truck. Just how big and bold, and honestly how much plastic we have here, and how the painted plastic, because this is still just plastic, is going to help create sort of a shape. But I think I really like it, and having a really stylized but boxy version of something like this coupe crossover is interesting, but probably not a bad thing for that Subaru brand. The lighting here is going to be pretty reminiscent of what we have up front. It stays sleek, but again, nice and bold. But let's go ahead and see what's going on behind the hatch here, because we are going to get just about 25 cubic feet of storage capacity, and it's going to be pretty easy to get to. Now, this model here is going to be an early production model. That means that this can probably be set to raise a little bit higher, but right now, once I lifted it, not an issue. We also have a cargo cover here. That's going to be one that you probably can't find a spot for if you do need to maximize your cargo space. But let's talk about that space itself, because it's a little bit interesting and split just a hair. It's got this kind of two level and two section design, which means you can go ahead and put something a little bit further back here. Maybe this would be a great spot for a blanket or a spare coat. And then up front here, you can put something a little bit bigger, a little bit deeper. In this case, I guess this is probably something like a cargo cover. If I can pull that aside just a little bit, you can see it goes down quite a ways. That's going to be your tire changing kit. It looks like no spare tire equipped on this model, something we see in a lot of EVs these days, but maybe a lot of Subaru owners wouldn't have expected that. We also do have a couple other amenities here, at least on this sport model. When you tuck inside here, we do have a 120 volt, 1500 watt outlet, which is great. That means you're gonna be able to maximize some of the power on board and make use of it off board. This would be something like if you pull up to your campsite, you can go ahead and plug in your coffee maker, or if you needed a heated blanket and want to enjoy the stars, that's a great way to do that as well. One of the only downsides about a roofline like this is what it probably does to the headroom in the back. So let's go ahead and climb in. I will say I really appreciate a hidden door handle, but I know not everybody does. So door handle is going to be a little bit taller up there. It is going to be that glossy black plastic. But another thing is that the space getting in here is pretty tight. So if you are trying to load people in and out regularly, I guess it's going to be good if you're parked closer to vehicles because this isn't going to swing very wide open, but it is going to be a little bit tough for folks who might have some mobility issues. Let me slide all the way over here though, so you can get a good look at what this looks like from the rear. Here in the sport model, we have the upgraded StarTex interior. It is going to be a lighter color, which really does help lighten the interior because in this model, there is no moonroof, but of course there will be a moonroof available. You'll get that on the GT. But what I suspected, unfortunately, is true. If I sit back, I am out of headroom, but not by an enormous amount. And here's my caveat. I'm 6 feet tall, but I have a very long torso. I run out of headroom faster than most. So if you are 6 feet tall, you'll probably fit back here. If you're anything under that, unless you're super long torso, you'd probably be okay. But you are going to sacrifice a little bit of headroom for the style that you get with a model like this. But you do also have a folding armrest here with 2 cup holders and a little bit of space, probably for something like a cell phone, nice and easy to use. And back here in the sport model, we have heated rear seats that they're on the outboard, 2 vents, no third zone climate control, but that is to be expected, and 2 USB-C ports plus a little bit of extra storage. And here in the door, just enough room for what I would say is a standard water bottle, but a little bit of extra storage there. If you are trying to put car seats back here though, this space is very limited. There are latch anchors here on the outboard seats, nothing here for the center, but again, if that's probably going to be pretty limited to a forward-facing seat, not a rearward-facing seat, and this opening is going to be a little bit tight. But let's see what things look like up front. This is going to look pretty similar because it is very reminiscent of what we find in the Solterra and also those comparable Toyota models, but that's not a bad thing. And Subaru does something a little bit different that I really appreciate. That's going to be this steering wheel. This is officially what we call the Squircle, but it has not just an interesting shape, but really helps itself work with the unique layout that Toyota has put together for their other models. And that's going to be this dual level display screen. So not only do we have a standard 14-inch infotainment screen, which is wonderful and easy to access, this one is a pretty early model, so we won't go ahead and dive too much into that software, but the driver display is going to be a mix between a heads-up display and a standard driver display. Instead of having something projected onto the screen is just much higher up in that dashboard, and having this flat top steering wheel makes it much easier to look over. I don't think everyone's going to love the design. It is a little bit reminiscent of a Tesla yoke, although the yoke is not connected, this one is, but honestly, I really like the way this looks. And something we'll find over here in the Subarus is going to be this orange accenting. It's not just because of the exterior color of this one. And in a world where red or blue are pretty much the standard accent colors, I really like that we have something different here, and it tends to work out pretty well. But as far as this passenger compartment goes, well, I do have room up here in the front seat, so your taller folks go ahead and sit up front. We have 2 wireless charging mats, going to be standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as a wireless feature. We have cup holders that are pretty easy to access, buttons and touchscreen controls, so there's a pretty good mix of the bunch. And then when it comes to storage, this is going to be a 2-way storage, so you can go ahead and flip either for the driver or the passenger, and that's going to be nice and easy to use. It's not terribly deep, I'll admit that. It's going to go ahead and fit my phone flat, and then obviously maybe 5 or 6 inches tall, but we do still have some space there. One thing missing up here is going to be a glove box. It's a nice sleek dashboard, and it does create more space here in the passenger footwell, but I wouldn't mind having a little bit extra storage. There is extra storage, but it's going to be found down below. You can see here that this is a complete pass-through. The only thing is it's going to be a little bit of a pain to get to. So it's not something I think you're going to utilize regularly. This is probably where I would go ahead and put things like your owner's manual, maybe your gloves. What would generally go into this compartment is likely going to go into here. But again, it does create that 2-tier storage level, and it does bring this much closer to the driver. So that's going to feel a little bit tighter, especially when a lot of other EVs have things nice and low and very open. Let me know if you prefer something maybe a little bit more conventional like this, or if you like that big, open, spacious interior. One thing I wouldn't mind having, especially in this model, is having that moonroof option. It's probably going to cut into my headroom a little bit, but it would just feel like it opens the space up a little bit. One thing I'll say for this versus, I guess, a lot of the other EV competition is that where lack of buttons tends to be the direction things are heading, this one has gone a very different one. Here on the steering wheel, there are a whole lot of buttons, and they're arranged in sort of an interesting fashion. Instead of just being limited here, they tend to take most of the space, especially since this wheel is quite a bit smaller. So that's going to be an interesting touch and something for people to get used to, but unless you do a lot of changing of things while you're driving, I don't think it's going to be an issue. The big one for me is that your volume is going to be here on a clicker. You also have your cruise control up here on the right. So those are going to be the easiest to get to and the ones you probably use most frequently. A few more buttons over here, things like your lights, your rear hatch opening, adjusting your odometer, but we also do have 2-position memory seating. You can see that up here in the door. This is not going to include the steering wheel, at least not here in that sport model. This is going to be a manual option. So whatever you save your seat to, you'll probably have to adjust that steering wheel, but we're not without any storage. This is a Subaru. I expect there to be room for large water bottles, and it looks like in here you'd be able to fit something a little bit larger than you can find here in the back seats. That's a lot of the car stuff. Let me make sure I touch on all the EV stuff that's going to be important to folks who have those questions. Like I said, this comes in one battery pack. It's a 74.7 kilowatt hour battery, which is larger than the outgoing Subaru models had, so you get a little bit more range. That means on the standard all-wheel drive, you're looking at about 290 miles of range. That means on the front-wheel drive, you're looking at up to 300 miles of range, but obviously different wheel and tire packages, likely what we see in the GT, would go ahead and lower that. When it comes to charging, that charge port is here on the front passenger side, which means pulling up to a Tesla supercharger is going to be really easy. You'll just pull in instead of back in. And we have an NACS connector here, which means that those superchargers are going to be native. Obviously, you can go ahead and get an adapter for anything like your level 2 or your DC fast charge at a CCS station. Level 2, this will charge at 11 kilowatts. You'll also be able to do your DC charging from 10 to 80% in about 30 minutes, including when it's cold. So for folks who live in Subaru climates, just know that it does have onboard battery preconditioning to make sure that it doesn't drag on if you do find yourself not just chilly, but in need of a charge. It'll top out at 150 kilowatts, which is not going to be class leading, but honestly, considering how little people really do DC charge, I think that's going to be more than plenty. And truly any more would make this a little bit more expensive, and we don't need vehicles to be any more expensive than they absolutely have to. And that's why I think Subaru has that front wheel drive option. I am surprised that Subaru has it where Toyota doesn't, but that means that if this is more up your alley, and honestly it probably is mine between those two specific models, that you can go ahead and get front wheel drive, which is better traction than rear wheel drive if you do find yourself in inclement climates, and get pretty much everything here. And it doesn't mean you have to get a top-end model to get things like safety features. Most of those are going to be built in as standard with the vehicle. It's mostly going to be complementary and convenience features that are added when you start going up the lineup. For myself, either the Sport or the Premium front-wheel drive would probably be where I stand, but later today we'll get a chance to see that GT. We'll go ahead and throw in a clip if we get that chance, and it's going to look very similar, but obviously just a little bit fancier. If all of that sounds up your alley, the only thing missing is going to be pricing and availability. Pricing, we do not know at this time, unfortunately. Trust me, I would love to tell you. That'll come closer to when these are going to be available for you to purchase. That's going to be early 2026, and the rest of the specifications that we don't have today will also be made available then. But this is likely to come in a little bit less expensive than that Toyota. That's something that honestly I'm very curious to see how that works and really how much that's picked up and whether Toyota does something there in the next couple of years. I'll also say that if this one doesn't work for you, for the first time, there are going to be multiple electric Subaru models for you to choose from. If you're not going for the more sporty vibe, you need a little bit more practicality, then you can go ahead and look at that Solterra over there. But if that isn't enough, great news, you have the Trail Seeker, and whatever you need, Subaru probably has an option for you, really for the first time in a long time, especially in the world of EVs. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave any comments you have because we will be able to get a chance to drive these later. We want to make sure that we can answer those questions. Leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.